Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite here. You know, as preppers, we do an awful lot of talking about and actually planning for bugging out when the situation warrants. If you take a look at what's going on with the Migrant Caravan that's making its way up from Honduras and Guatemala through Mexico and heading to the United States, let's take a look and compare and contrast about what bugging out is really all about here. Current guess right now is that the Migrant Caravan is about 800 some miles from the closest point of entry in McAllen, Texas. As preppers, like I said in the intro, as preppers we do an awful lot of discussion about bugging out, making plans for it, even practicing bugging out scenarios, seeing how long it's going to take us, how much gear we're going to have. But when we're doing this as preppers, there's a couple of very standard things that we've got to have already in mind as we make those plans and preparations. First is, where are you going to go? You're going to be bugging out somewhere. Where are you going to go? And how are you going to get there? Well, I guess my primary thought would be I'm going to load up my Jeep and I'm going to hop in the Jeep and we're going to drive to our bug out location. How long is it going to take? Well, for me it's about 50-55 miles depending on which way we go, trying to skirt the major highways. But if we've got a grid down kind of a situation, a collapse of some sort, society's gone crazy, it may take a little bit longer than that. But, you know, I'm talking 3 to 4 hours max, maybe a day if the situation's really bad. And if I gotta walk, it's gonna take 3 or 4 days. So that's kind of the how long's it gonna take, at least for me, to my bug out location. So what supplies are you gonna need? Well, in a normal routine kind of a bug out situation, you're gonna need some food and a way to cook it. Maybe if you want to do that, you can go light on that a little bit if you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to get there in 24, 48, or even 72 hours. You're going to need some water, a way to procure water, at least a way to carry some if you happen to be walking by a river or a stream or a lake or a pond or something. And you're going to need a way to purify that on the way, so that you've got hydration and you've got hygiene. You're going to need proper clothing. So for the season, you're going to want to make sure that you're dressed appropriately. If it's hot and humid, you're going to want to dress pretty light. If it's in the winter time, you're going to want to make sure that you've got wool socks, long pants, underalls, heavy shirt, coat, hat, earmuffs, hat, mufflers, that kind of stuff, gloves for sure. So that's going to be seasonal, and it's going to be depending on what your mode of transport's going to be. It may not be as critical if you're going to be sitting in a warm Jeep with a heater going, or if you're going to be actually hoofing it out there in a 40-degree rainstorm. That's going to be quite different. So rain gear, heavy coats, jackets, hats, gloves, extras of those things. If you do get wet, that's the kind of planning that you have to do when you're really talking about a serious bug out kind of a scenario or a situation or something that you may want to practice for. You're going to want to take care of first aid and medical. Generally, a small first aid kit, if it's just you and your spouse and maybe a kid or something, a small first aid kit's probably going to get you through just for the cuts and bruises and that kind of stuff. If it's going to be an extended period of time, you're going to want to augment that first aid and medical. If you've got medical conditions, you're going to want to make sure that you've got your medical preps ready, extra pills, ointments, whatever it is that you take to remain healthy, carry that with you. So there's a lot of considerations when you're trying to put together just your own personal bug out plan. Well, let's talk about the folks in this caravan. At last count, I don't know, somewhere between 4,000 and 7,000. I've heard estimates up to 12,000, but it seems to be dwindling a little bit now. The estimates aren't quite as lavish as they were in the past. So let's just talk, maybe we're talking 3,000 to 4,000 people that are in this group that are trying to make their way up from Honduras, Guatemala, and up through Mexico. At last count, best I can estimate, they're about 800 miles from the closest entry port in Texas. That's going to take a while. Healthy people walking at a fair pace can do maybe 3 miles an hour. And if you're in really good shape, you might be able to do 4 miles an hour. But let's just use 3 miles an hour as the deal. And you're going to be trying to get there as fast as you can. So you're going to be walking a good part of the day. So let's just say you're going to put in 8 hours of walking. All right? So 800 miles, 3 miles an hour. It's going to take you 267 hours. That's 33 days. Straight walking, 8 hours a day, 3 miles an hour. 33 days. How much food, water, medical, clothing, shelters, that kind of stuff are you really going to need to make that trip and then multiply it by 3,000 or 4,000? These people can't carry that stuff on their back. Just to have enough water for one person for 33 days, you can't carry it on your back. It's a ton of water. It really is. A gallon weighs just over 8 pounds, 8 1/3 pounds, something like that. An average person's going to need about a gallon of water a day. Yeah, you can skimp a little bit here and there, but to maintain your hydration and to maintain your hygiene, you're going to need about a gallon of water a day. At 8 pounds a gallon, that's going to add up pretty quick. You're going to need to be able to carry it with you. If you can't carry the full 2 tons all at once, you're going to need to be able to have containers, buckets, something like that, to fish it out of the stream, and you're still going to need to be able to boil it, purify it, consume it in some fashion that's safe. It's quite a logistical problem just for one person or a family of 3 or 4, but multiply that by 3,000 or 4,000 individuals trying to make their way through the hot climate, the dusty desert back roads of Mexico. It's like they say, you don't drink the water in Mexico. But there you go. That's one of the logistical issues that I see is going to make it darn near impossible for these folks to actually make it and get here. It's almost impossible to contemplate. You're looking at food. These folks are going to be walking, what, 24 miles a day on an average, 3 miles an hour for 8-hour day. It's 24 miles. You figure you're going to be burning 100 calories a mile. So that's 2,400 calories just to maintain that pace. That's a lot of food consumption, 2,400. Your typical MRE is going to be somewhere between 1,000 and maybe 1,500 total calories. That's just one. You're probably going to need 2 of them per person. I don't know where these folks are getting the food from. They're certainly not carrying it with them. They're not dressed appropriately. to make a trek of 800 miles. I looked at some of the videos, some of the still photographs that are on some of the news outlets, and these folks are walking in flip-flops and Crocs. Some are barefoot. Some are wearing sneakers. A couple of people had actual hiking boots on, that kind of, but they're trying to make an 800-mile trek in flip-flops. It's just not going to be possible. They're going to have sore feet at the very least, and they're going to end up with blisters, possibly infections and all that. It's really a logistical nightmare for these people to actually get there. Yeah, they're going to accept some charity on the way. There's good-minded people on the pathway that they've selected to get here, but are they aiding and abetting in a criminal enterprise? I don't know. They're just trying to be good Samaritans. I think that's probably the motivation for most of those folks. But bottom line is the logistics are just not in favor of this being a successful caravan. And caravan's a terrible word for this. A caravan means something entirely different than the meaning that it's currently being associated with these migrants making an invasion to the United States. I don't care what your philosophy is about immigration. I know what mine is. I think these people have an opportunity here in the United States if they decide that they want to come here for the right reasons and they don't want to carry their flag with them and they don't want to paint swastikas on the stars and stripes and set it on fire. Folks that do that, they're not, in my mind and in my heart, they're not welcome here. If they want to come here for economic opportunity, if they can prove that they're actually victims of war and pestilence and you name it, that kind of a thing that can allow them to seek asylum, yeah, I'll be for that. But just to have thousands and thousands of them massed together, try to make it here, I don't know. Somebody's helping them. Some of the folks in Mexico are probably going out of their way to make sure that they've got some extra food and extra water and all that. But you can't feed 3,000 or 4,000 people with just whatever else you may have extra in your house, especially in poverty-stricken areas in Mexico. I've been in Mexico, I've been in that southern part of Mexico, and it is a very interesting place if you want to compare it to rural Kansas, for example. It's a whole different world. If you're a prepper and you've thought about bugging out and you thought about the supplies that you're going to need, you thought about the resources that you're going to have, if you've thought about your destination, if you've thought about how you're going to get there, apply that knowledge to what's going on with this migrant caravan that's trying to make its way through Mexico right now, and apply that logic to it and see if you don't agree that they have a logistical nightmare in front of them. This is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you all on the next video.